Hello, everyone. Thank you very much, Natasha, for introducing me and for inviting me over here. Just for some of you who don't know and haven't read anything about me, I am a psychologist with specialties in consumer, retail, and hospitality, especially. And we work on various projects, including advising on the design of the interiors. And for some of you that would like to see some of the work in actual real situation, go to stand D50, which is RPA Group, one of our clients, where we advised on that on the sensory aspects and provided some insights. But some of those insights I'm going to share today. The first question I'm actually having more for you than anything else: who thinks over here that we as consumers are rational and calculated in our decisions? No one? Yes. So who thinks we are actually completely irrational, very subconscious, and more emotional in our decisions? Pretty much 70%. Okay, so there are some undecided ones, so hopefully by the end of this presentation, we're gonna be fine. So, we are actually completely subconscious. An interesting statistic published a few years ago by one of the psychologists, they've done extensive tests on it, but basically what they found out is that actually our subconscious brain can process as much as 11 million bits of information per second. It's a single second. Whereas our conscious brain can barely manage to process 40 bits. And that's not on a sort of good level. And that basically means for us that pretty much about 95% of our decisions are completely subconscious. We do not have any control over them. They just happen and then we behave accordingly to them. And actually majority of the other 5% will be influenced and primed by what's happening in our subconscious. So in the end of the day, we are completely irrational. But I will show you some of the examples soon. How that happens, that 11 million bits, is through our senses. And actually, what the common perception is that we have 5 senses, but scientists already agree that we have 6 main senses, and then one that is added, which is bodily sensations. What is that? Is basically how your muscles and how your body are reacting to the environment. So things like hard floor or soft sitting that you're sitting on. That's also an information for your brain about the environment. There will be some things that I will share about that. But for example, the fact that you're currently sitting on a fairly hard sit, that means that you're not as persuadable by me as I would like. So I would prefer soft sits next time, Natasha. Okay, thank you. But I will explain some of the things more based on the story of Ben and Chloe, because some of the organizers decided it's gonna be a little bit more fun like that. So, Chloe, she's a psychologist. She's quite adventurous. She generally is an entrepreneur at heart. She absolutely loves fine things in life, and she loves reading books. Ben, on the other hand, is an investment banker. He's also an adventurer, but he's quite creative, actually, in what he does. He loves spoiling people, himself as well a little bit, but hey, that's men things, right? And then, of course, he loves technology. So the first time that they've met was actually in a bar. And of course, sparkles started flying and everything was beautiful. But as a psychologist, I would straight away ask why. And of course, it could be chemistry and standard attraction elements. But actually, there was plenty of environmental factors that were playing over there. And one of them was the dim lighting in a bar. So the dim lighting, the studies show that actually will decrease our self-awareness and self-control and the socially conforming behavior, and actually our desires will take more charge, and therefore will be more impulsive. That's why when you're going into the bar, you're drinking more than you were expecting, right? Yeah, next time go to a better lit bar. It's just gonna be easier. Then another thing it was playing over there was actual music. Studies will show us that, for example, slow tempo music will increase the time that people stay in a place by 24%. but also they will spend more money, about 15% more than they would expect. And that's not necessarily classical, but of course classical is a good example of that. Also, generally, because it will be associated with more sophisticated elements, so it will prime our choices for more sophisticated products, more expensive, more luxurious products. And of course, that kind of helped Ben and Chloe because Ben decided to buy a little bit more expensive wine and she loves finer things in life. So all went very well and they kind of fell in love. So it was all nice and they decided to go for a first date. And for that first date, Chloe decided to buy a red dress because as a psychologist, she knew that red makes people more attractive. Hopefully. No, there are actual tons of studies on that. It does make people more attractive. But actually, for men, black is better. And remember for your next dates. So she went shopping for a red dress online. Little did she know that it's basically quite exhaustive to look for the same thing over and over again, like 40 red dresses. Is bloody boring. And unfortunately, the site that she was using wasn't necessarily misguided, but had a lot of those type of pictures. So her process was even more cognitively charged, and therefore the product uniqueness wasn't as high. And then she decided to go to another site, this was ASOS in that case, which also has number of pictures, not just a singular image, but the way it is presented, it is not visible straight away that when you're looking at it, so it seems less overwhelming cognitively. And that actually helped because the dresses seemed more unique for her, more distinctive, and that study showed that uniqueness and distinctiveness was actually increased by 16%, which of course led to the preference for particular products. So as you can see, those are the things that we are completely outside of our awareness, but they somehow influenced Chloe's perception. So she ended up buying the dress in ASOS. Ben, on the other hand, decided that he's going to go and buy some chocolates for Chloe. So he went to this really cool place in Shoreditch, Mast Brothers, which is actually a chocolate factory, as they call it, not a chocolate shop. Because they actually do have the whole production of the chocolate from the cocoa beans to the packaging happening inside of the store. And of course, he was completely enticed by the scent. There is actually a lot of sort of chocolate scent pumping out, and you can sense it about 20 to 30 meters away from the store. So when you kind of across the street or even farther, you can already sense it, so you're being actually attracted to the place naturally. Then the product journey, you are being able to see actually the production happening. You can also go for the factory tours. So that product journey, which is one of the growing consumer behavior trends where we need to actually know how that product is being made, from the ingredient to who is making it, how it's happening and everything, and better yet see it in front of our eyes, is precisely what Mast Brothers is delivering, and it's a very good jump, faster than any other retailer on top of it. Then their experience is very immersive. They have this kind of sort of more museum-like display, but it works for them because the perception then of the pricing is naturally higher. So we are justified, therefore, to pay, I think it's something like 9-10 quid for a chocolate bar. It's crazy prices, but it works with that design. Then you can do tastings and stuff like that, and the factory trips, which basically all in all creates this sort of really engaging and amazing experience. So Ben decided to buy the chocolate over there. The problem was that Chloe didn't know anything of that brand and didn't have all the environmental factors to influence her, so it wasn't as engaging for her. But hey, as a woman, as a psychologist, she was a little bit smarter, so she gave Ben a chance for a second date. So for a second date, Ben decided to take her to an Italian wine shop and restaurant. And actually, that was a good choice for him because, as we remember, Chloe likes finer things in life, and wine is one of those things. The problem for Ben, and especially his wallet, was that shop and a restaurant was very aware of certain things like music, culturally congruent music to be more precise, and temperature. So, of course, it wasn't French music, it was Italian music, but there was a study actually done in the actual wine retailer where it was sort of a majority of the French wines, but other countries were also represented. They played the French music, then they alternated with others. But basically, whenever they played the French music, the sales of the French wine jumped up by 76%. And that is also confirmed in various other studies regarding culturally sort of congruent sensory stimulation with the cultural origin of the products that are being sold. So of course for Ben it was a little bit off because he kind of ended up spending a little bit more money than he was expecting. And on top of that, they were very smart also in there. So they had a better temperature than a standard one. So the standard sort of retail temperature you would expect 21, 22 degrees Celsius maximum. Those studies that I'm quoting over here have been done on 24, 25 degrees Celsius. And what they basically show that our willingness to pay for things is actually increased in the warm temperature, as you can see, by 36%. And also we are behaving more socially conforming. So the product that are more socially conforming will be increasing. And in the case of Ben and Chloe, socially conforming in an Italian wine shop is basically drinking lots of wine. So they drank a little bit more than they expected, but it was all good because they ended up being very happy all together. And eventually, after a couple of months, they decided to travel together. But as we know, before we travel anywhere, we tend to go shopping again, right? All spending money, nothing else. So Ben decided that he needs an Apple Watch, right? Because of course you do, the latest invention. Little did he know that his choice of actually buying that Apple Watch and his willingness to buy it wasn't necessarily purely to the fact that he just wanted it, but also to the fact that actually he passed the Selfridges window every day on the way to his work. So he was enticed by these beautiful VM displays. So the flowers made the idea that it's very sort of new and innovative. Then we had the natural sort of immersive experience, the fact that the flowers are actually coming out to us from the windows. It was inviting us over, but it was also immersing us in that world of the flowers. The product was actually very scarce. As you can probably remember, some of you that's seen those windows, there were sometimes 1 to maximum 3 of the iWatches actually displayed. But that means that the scarcity of the product was actually increasing the price perception, so the justification for paying the huge amounts of money for it was there, basically. So it was good. And then the bright lights, as opposed to the dim one that I've mentioned earlier, was basically increasing the social conformity from Ben. So because everyone else is buying the Apple Watch, then he also has to have one, right? So yeah, so he ended up buying it. Now, Chloe went to buy some sandals. The kind of problem was that she ended up leaving with hat and the clutch and another pair of shoes as well. So that's something that she really planned. And part of it was Anthropologie's way of merchandising. They actually have a very sort of complementary merchandising strategy. And a lot of studies, both in an actual retail sector but also scientific, are showing that it's generally more effective in sales and engagement to have complementary products, simply because people are not really that good at imagination, or they're already cognitively overwhelmed. They have too much stressful things happening in their life. So if you can make it easy for them and bring things that are actually working together, it's much easier for them to get engaged and buy those products, because then it's faster, it's less decision that has to actually go into it. On top of that, Anthropologie has a very good immersive and sensory design. It's extremely consistent, perfectly on the brand. There is no negative interaction in between any of the sensory representations. So you generally feel very comfortable over there. You just want to stay there and browse there. and you are ending up buying a little bit more than you expected. The fact that they don't have too many of the products kind of go with their price range. Of course, this is not as high as, for example, iWatch, so you have to then sort of level it to your price range, but it's still sort of a middle market. So of course they're going to have less products than, for example, Primark will have displayed, right? And then the dim lights also in the anthropology will create that emotional comfort, but as we said, the impulsive purchases as well. Hence, Chloe ended up buying a little bit more than she expected. The haptic merchandising, what I mean by that over here is you also additionally have all the sort of display elements like that wooden ball and things like that. So it's quite surprising, it's quite lovely. Another thing that they have, which I don't have a picture for, they have sunflower seeds when they're selling the knobs. So when you're actually going to touch the knob, it feels really nice with the sunflower seeds. It also doesn't feel so empty in the boxes that they have for the knobs. So it basically looks better, it looks more professional that way. Now, the next occasion for them for shopping was actually going to a friend's wedding. So, of course, Chloe needed to buy a dress and Ben needed to buy a suit. The problem was a little bit that they decided to have a dinner with their friends later on that evening. So they were very hungry after their work, and they basically just needed to quickly cram up that shopping. Yes, the problem for their wallet. When you're hungry, actually, you end up spending about 64% more, and that's not on food. That's on technology and fashion. So never go shopping hungry. Your wallet will suffer. But from the retailer's point of view, how can we use that? Especially from the VM point of view. If you are including in your VM, because it makes sense with the story, some type of food elements or related things like herbs and stuff like that, then it is additionally going to increase that craving. It is going to put that food idea and that fact that your stomach is empty, which is slightly then associated with the emotional emptiness, then you can fill in with the actual purchase of the fashion or tech items. So if you're going to use that product, it is naturally going to put the hunger at the sort of top of their head. So they're going to naturally pay more attention to things that are in some way or another consistent. So just an example, if you, let's say, have green apples on your VM displays, then we will naturally, of course, be feeling a little bit more hungry, but also we will be more inclined to go for things like fresh light dresses, sort of flowery prints, colors that are a little bit brighter. So it kind of goes a long way. So of course, unfortunately, Ben and Chloe ended up spending a lot of money because they were hungry, but also because of the fact that the store that they went to had a very well designed scent strategy. And what I mean by that, they made sure that it's not only fitting with the brand and its story and the personality and creating the right sort of ambience and the environment and experience for the customers, but it also was alternated between a women's wear and a menswear department. And why that's important, as you can see from that particular study, the sensory representations are not only supposed to go with the brand, they also need to go with the product. As we've mentioned before, culturally congruent, but also gender congruent. If you're going to put a scent that isn't associated with female-like scents into a women's wear department, you're generally not going to have a good effect. And that study proved precisely that. So what they did, they first of all analyzed what are the best representation of the female and male scents, and then ended up with female scent being vanilla and a male scent being rose marrock. And they've alternated that sense within the actual retail environment. And in certain cases, it was congruent. So the vanilla was in a women's wear department, but in certain cases, it was incongruent. So the rosemary was in a women's wear department. And what they found out, whenever it was congruent, the dwell time generally increased by 50% and the spending by almost 140. It's really crazy statistics, but it just shows us perfectly how really irrational and purely subconscious we are in our decisions. So for Ben and Chloe's wallet, it wasn't very good, of course, but fortunately their relationship survived, and they lived happily ever after. But what's most important for me here is not trying to necessarily tell you how you can trick people, how you can make spend them more, but it's all of those kind of sensory things that are shared with you are showing the importance of really how you have to make consumers feel rather than make them think or make them move, because as soon as they feel in a way which is congruent with your brand, they have an amazing experience. They feel relaxed. They feel engaged, enticed to your brand. They feel attracted to it in some way or another. Then they will naturally stay there longer. They will naturally spend more. But what's more important is that they will build much longer term relationship with you. And that is purely delivered by the full real experience. You can still play with it on the digital level, as one of those studies mentioned, and you can make people imagine certain senses and certain sensory expressions of your brand, because the brain will actually behave in a very similar manner when we're imagining a scent or a taste as if we are actually having it. So it is possible to do some of those things I mentioned digitally, but at the end of the day, it's about a very consistent and purely immersive experience that creates that overall feeling about your brand and about the type of relationship you want to have. For those of you who want to know more, we've just published an introductory version of our sensory retail design report, which has some of those information. And then the full version will launch on 12 April as well on our website. But feel free to download the complimentary version at the moment. And if you have... Still taking pictures? If you have any questions, just email me or tweet me, or just anything else, just even chat now. Thank you very much. Oh, faster.
Thank you, Kate. So that was a really insightful talk, and I'm sure we will have lots of questions. So who would like to ask a question?
I don't bite.
Yeah,
you can
don't
ask.
be shy. Don't be shy.
My students know that I don't bite, and if doesn't anyone, yeah, great.
Hi, my name is Anthony Boland. I'm the CEO of Cap and Creative. We do retail branding. I was just interested in the psychology of smell and how it relates to buying things like, for example, underwear.
So generally, with any scent, or even any sensory representation of the brand, there's a number of things to consider. Not only that it has to be gender congruent, culturally congruent, product congruent, and brand congruent. Those are the sort of key elements, but that it also is consistent with all of the other sensory representations. And the one thing that also is very dangerous is that the senses interact with each other. So some of the effects can be, for example, diminished by the lighting or diminished by the color and stuff like that. So with regards to an underwear, generally I would straight away go for things that are even more ambient than in the normal circumstances. For everyone, ambient sensory representations are much better, especially if it comes to scent, than things that you can sense straight away. Like, for example, if I'm sorry if there's anyone from Abercrombie or Hollister over here, but if you go over there, their scent is much too high. So it actually does not work anymore on our subconscious brain. But with regards to an underwear, I would go even lighter to make it very smooth, very relaxed, because you want to increase that dwell time even more than in a normal retail environment. Because it's very personal, very intimate, but you also want them emotionally comfortable, because it's kind of, it's very personal purchase. Does that answer your question? We can always talk more. So.
Other questions? I have a quick question, if that's okay.
Yeah, of course.
Can you just explain a little bit how you might work with a client?
Yes. So let's try to focus on the retail design project, because we absolutely touch on everything that the brand does. But with a retail design, we usually start from an absolute beginning when we just looking at the overall strategy of what the brand is trying to achieve, and then we will work with the design practice. And actually, majority of the time, a design practice is our client. So we are helping with their client. So we will discuss, first of all, an overall experience and an overall journey that needs to be created for that particular physical space. But then we'll, of course, cross it with the brand personality, overall brand book, assuming that there is one, because as we know, it does not happen very often. But assuming that there is one, we always will cross it with the brand book and make sure that that overall experience, if it comes to emotions, behaviors, and decisions, is perfectly designed and established, and everyone agrees on it. What I mean by everyone, absolutely every department, not just retail design, marketing, branding, all the executive team. They all have to agree on one thing, because they all have to work in tandem for that one single space to be basically working very well, to be effective. And only then we will start to look with the designers for an actual concept, starting with things like actual layout, how they're going to move, are we going to allow enough of the personalization of that movement. Then we will also look at absolutely all the sensory representations of the brand within that space, cross it against the ideas for the concept and all the design, and so on, like with everything will go. And then we'll basically be there as a sort of devil's advocate approach for each design recommendation, to make sure that on that subconscious level is delivering all that emotions, behaviors, and decisions that actually been established at the beginning of the project.
Lovely. That was a lovely, thorough answer. Thank you, Kate. Anyone got
Thank
any
you.
other questions for Kate? Well, I would thoroughly recommend you go over and see stand D50, was it?
D50 is our PA group. It's one of our clients, so
And I'd like you to
come
join
and
me.
relax over there.
Yes, join me in thanking Kate for a really interesting talk. Thank you.
Thank you.